into a sacred moment of finding calm in God's faithful promises, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of receiving His grace for the day, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of opening our hearts to His leading, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of yielding our plans to God's will, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of leaning on His unfailing love, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of allowing His peace to reshape us, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. Each morning invites us into a sacred moment of beginning the day with sacred surrender, reminding our hearts that God remains near and faithful always. In this quiet space, we breathe deeply and release the unseen burdens that cling to our thoughts, trusting God to hold them gently. As we turn our focus to His presence, peace begins to settle within us, softening every anxious whisper that tries to rise. Here we learn to yield our own strength and depend fully on the steady comfort that only God's loving Spirit can provide. With renewed courage, we step forward into the day, believing that God walks beside us and guides our hearts with unwavering grace. When we surrender our worries to God, a deeper understanding forms within our hearts, reminding us that trust is not weakness but a courageous act of faith. Each burden we release becomes an offering of honesty, showing God that we desire His presence more than our need to control outcomes. In this surrender, we learn to listen more attentively to His gentle whispers guiding us through uncertainty. God never hurriedly lifts our concerns but carries them with perfect timing and compassion. As we rest in Him, we discover a peace the world cannot give, a peace shaped by His unfailing love surrounding us daily. Learning to surrender is often a process, a daily decision made in quiet moments when our minds grow overwhelmed. God invites us to bring every fear and doubt before Him, encouraging us to trust that He sees what we cannot. In His wisdom, He prepares a way even when circumstances feel dark or confusing. When we release our hold on worry, we make room for His steady guidance to lead our steps. Resting in God does not remove challenges, but it strengthens us to face them with renewed courage, knowing His presence remains constant. In surrender, we find our greatest refuge. Each day carries its own weight, yet God reminds us not to bear it alone. He extends His hand gently, calling us to trust Him with what burdens our hearts. When we come before Him with honesty, He meets us with compassion rather than judgment. In prayer, we learn to exchange anxiety for assurance, fear for faith, and confusion for clarity. God's peace begins to form quietly within us, shaping our thoughts and steadying our emotions. As we choose to rest in His love, we become more aware that His strength truly is made perfect in our weakness, guiding us faithfully through every challenge and uncertainty ahead. Resting fully in God means acknowledging that His ways are higher than ours and His plans always unfold with purpose. We may not understand every situation, yet God sees the entire path before us and guides us with perfect wisdom. When we surrender our expectations, we open our hearts to receive His direction. This surrender becomes an act of trust, teaching us to rely not on our own understanding but on His steady hand. In God's presence, we discover a place where fear loses its power. His peace surrounds us like a gentle blanket, reminding us that we are never alone, even in difficult seasons. There are moments when worry rises quietly, slipping into our thoughts before we notice its presence. Yet God invites us to cast every anxiety on Him because He cares for us deeply. In prayer, we learn to breathe again, to slow our racing minds, and to remember that God holds our future securely. Resting in Him brings clarity that worry cannot offer. As we turn our attention toward His promises, the weight on our shoulders begins to lift. God replaces fear with courage and doubt with renewed hope. Each time we surrender, His peace grows stronger within us, shaping our hearts to trust Him more deeply. Surrendering worry is not a sign of defeat but a declaration that God is greater than anything we face. In His presence, we find the strength our hearts long for. Each prayer becomes a reminder that we are held by one who understands every detail of our lives. God listens tenderly, responding not with haste but with wisdom shaped by perfect love. As we rest in Him, we learn to quiet the voice of fear and embrace the stillness He provides. In that stillness, our faith deepens, and our confidence in His promises strengthens, guiding us through every trial with renewed assurance. God invites us to trade our burdens for His peace, offering rest that reaches the deepest parts of our souls. This exchange transforms us from within, shaping our thoughts to align with His truth. When we surrender, we acknowledge that God's strength is far greater than our own. He carries what we cannot and restores what worry has weakened. In moments of silence, He calms our anxious hearts and fills us with quiet confidence. Resting in His presence allows us to see our circumstances through the lens of His faithfulness, reminding us that He never abandons those who trust in Him completely. Trust grows each time we lay our worries at God's feet, choosing faith over fear. Though challenges may remain, our hearts become anchored in His promises. God teaches us that rest is not found in perfect circumstances but in His constant nearness. When we pause to breathe deeply and remember His goodness, peace begins to rise within us. This peace shapes our thoughts, guiding us to respond with grace rather than anxiety. As we rest in God, He strengthens us in unseen ways, preparing us to walk forward with confidence. In surrender, we discover His love working powerfully within every detail. Our hearts often wrestle between surrender and control, yet God patiently leads us into deeper trust. He understands our weaknesses and meets us with gentle encouragement. When we release our tight grip on worry, we allow His Spirit to bring comfort and clarity. Resting in God teaches us to wait with patience, believing that His timing is always perfect. Even in silence, He works behind the scenes, aligning circumstances with His plans. As we surrender daily, our hearts become more attuned to His voice. His peace settles steadily within us, reminding us that He remains faithful in every situation we face. There are days when surrender feels difficult, when uncertainties crowd our thoughts and fear attempts to overwhelm us. Yet God whispers reassurance, reminding us that His presence is stronger than any storm. When we bring our worries to Him, He envelops us with peace that defies explanation. Resting in God allows us to breathe freely again, trusting His promises rather than our anxious thoughts. He carries our concerns with tenderness, guiding us gently through each moment. As we surrender consistently, our faith matures, and we stand more firmly on His truth, knowing we are held securely by His unwavering love. Resting in God is a discipline of choosing stillness over striving. In the quiet, we hear His voice more clearly, guiding us toward hope. Our hearts slow down, and we begin to sense His presence surrounding us. God restores peace where worry once lived, teaching us that true strength comes from reliance on Him. As we surrender our concerns, He fills us with stability that circumstances cannot shake. This rest allows our souls to breathe, freeing us from the weight of fear. In God's presence, we find safety, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose for every step ahead. Worry often tries to shape our thoughts, but God invites us to think according to His promises. When we surrender our anxious thoughts, He replaces them with truth that strengthens our hearts. Resting in God helps us recognize His faithfulness woven into our story. Each moment of surrender becomes a testimony of trust, revealing that He is always working for our good. In His presence, our fears lose their grip, and we experience freedom from what once overwhelmed us. As we rest in Him, our confidence grows, not in ourselves but in the One who holds all things together. In moments of exhaustion, God calls us to rest and find renewal in His presence. Surrendering our worries allows Him to restore our weary spirits. He lifts burdens gently, reminding us that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. As we release our anxieties, His peace begins to refresh our hearts. God's love steadies us, creating space for hope to flourish again. Resting in Him reminds us that we do not walk alone. He guides us with compassion and wisdom. Each surrendered moment deepens our trust, strengthening us for whatever lies ahead with renewed courage and faith. When we surrender our worries, we open our hearts to God's transformation. He shapes our perspective, so we can see beyond the weight of present concerns. Resting in Him teaches us to listen for His guidance in every situation. As we trust His timing, we find comfort knowing His plans are always good. God strengthens us in the quiet spaces, preparing us for challenges with patience and courage. His peace reaches the deepest parts of our souls, calming what once felt overwhelming. Each act of surrender becomes a step toward deeper faith, reminding us of His unwavering presence. Surrender leads us to a place of rest, where God's peace surrounds us fully. He invites us to trust Him not just with our present struggles but with our future as well. When we release our worries daily, our hearts become lighter, and our thoughts begin to align with His truth. In God's presence, fear fades and hope grows stronger. As we rest in Him, we recognize that His love remains constant, guiding us through uncertainty with grace. Each moment of surrender deepens our relationship with Him, reminding us that He is our refuge, strength, and everlasting source of peace. Each new day becomes an opportunity to walk in the assurance that God strengthens us as we surrender every worry to Him. When we lift our concerns in prayer, He meets us with tenderness and wisdom that calms our restless thoughts. His presence reminds us that we are never required to face life's uncertainties alone. Even when the path ahead feels unclear, God's guidance remains steady. As we rest in Him, we gain renewed confidence to keep moving forward. His peace becomes our anchor, shaping our decisions and surrounding us with hope that does not fade. In God, we find refuge. God continually invites us to trust Him more deeply, drawing us into His presence where fear loses its power. When we place our burdens in His hands, we discover strength beyond our limitations. His Spirit works gently within us, reshaping our thoughts and renewing our courage. We come to understand that surrender is not a one-time act but a daily practice of releasing control. Resting in God teaches us to depend on His promises rather than our anxieties. As we lean into His grace, our hearts grow steadier, and our minds become clearer. His peace transforms everything. There is a quiet freedom found in acknowledging that we cannot carry every burden alone. God understands the weight we feel and offers comfort that reaches deeper than words. In prayer, we bring our worries honestly before Him, trusting that He listens with compassion. As we surrender our fears, God replaces them with assurance shaped by His unchanging truth. Rest allows our spirits to breathe again, creating room for faith to rise. With each surrendered moment, we learn to recognize His presence in ways we previously overlooked. God's love shapes us gently, guiding us toward greater trust. Even in seasons of uncertainty, God remains our constant source of strength. He invites us to rest in His presence, releasing every heavy thought that tries to overwhelm our hearts. In surrender, we find clarity and renewed hope. God's promises remind us that He works through every circumstance, shaping outcomes according to His perfect will. When we allow Him to calm our fears, our confidence grows, not in ourselves, but in His unfailing guidance. His peace steadies our steps, leading us through challenges we once feared. Resting in God becomes a refuge where our souls find deep and lasting comfort. As we continue learning to surrender, we realize that God's peace is not dependent on the absence of problems but on the certainty of His presence. He walks with us through every situation, offering wisdom we could never find on our own. When we choose to rest in Him, our hearts become anchored in truth rather than overwhelmed by anxiety. God strengthens us to face each day with renewed faith. His love surrounds us like a gentle shield, reminding us that we are held securely. In surrender, we discover freedom, and in rest, we find the courage to continue forward. God's faithfulness becomes evident when we bring our worries to Him consistently. He does not turn away from our struggles but meets us with patience and understanding. In the quietness of prayer, He realigns our thoughts with His peace. Surrender helps us release the belief that we must solve everything alone. Rest empowers us to listen for His direction with clearer hearts. As trust deepens, we begin to see how He works through every detail, even those we do not fully understand. His grace strengthens us gently, leading us step by step. In Him, we find unwavering hope. Daily surrender transforms our relationship with God, teaching us to approach Him with honesty. When fear rises, we bring it to Him. When doubt whispers, we silence it with His promises. Resting in God allows our hearts to settle into a rhythm of peace that steadies our thoughts and strengthens our faith. He guides us through uncertainty with compassion, reminding us that His plans are always good. As we trust Him more, our souls learn to rest without hesitation. Each moment in His presence renews us, revealing how deeply He cares for every part of our lives. There are times when our worries feel too heavy to describe, yet God understands every unspoken concern. He meets us in moments of quiet surrender, offering peace that gently soothes our weary souls. Resting in Him allows us to release what we cannot control. His presence becomes a sanctuary where we regain strength and clarity. As we trust His promises, our hearts become more grounded in truth. God works patiently, shaping us from the inside out. With each surrender, we learn that His love is deeper than our fears and His grace stronger than our greatest anxieties. Surrendering our worries becomes easier when we remember how faithfully God has carried us before. His past goodness reminds us that He will continue to guide us in every new challenge. In prayer, we recount His faithfulness, allowing gratitude to replace anxiety. Resting in God shifts our focus from what troubles us to the One who sustains us. His presence renews our courage, reminding us that nothing is outside His care. As we trust Him, our hearts grow stronger, and our perspective becomes clearer. In surrender, we discover lasting peace anchored in His eternal love. God invites us into deeper rest, encouraging us to place every concern into His capable hands. When we release our worries, we allow His peace to fill spaces once occupied by fear. His promises provide stability, guiding us through moments of uncertainty. As we rest in Him, our hearts begin to recognize His presence in the simplest moments of each day. Surrender teaches us humility, reminding us that true strength is found in reliance on God. His guidance leads us gently forward, shaping our days with purpose. In His care, we discover a peace no circumstance can disturb. Resting in God strengthens our ability to face challenges with resilience. When we surrender our worries, He equips us with wisdom and patience. His presence steadies our thoughts and helps us see beyond temporary difficulties. God reminds us that He is not distant but deeply involved in every detail of our lives. As we trust Him, we gain the courage to release our need for control. His peace reaches the deepest parts of our hearts, calming our fears and renewing our hope. With each act of surrender, we grow more aware of His faithful and unfailing guidance. God shapes our hearts through seasons of surrender, teaching us to rely on Him moment by moment. When worry tries to fill our thoughts, we choose to bring it before Him. In prayer, He strengthens our spirit, reminding us that His grace is sufficient for every challenge. Resting in Him becomes a daily rhythm that refreshes our souls. His presence removes confusion and fills us with clarity. As we trust His lead, we recognize His hand working even in small moments. Surrender helps us grow into people of deeper faith, steadier confidence, and unwavering hope. Each time we surrender our worries, God invites us into deeper intimacy with Him. He sees beyond our anxieties and understands the fears we struggle to express. In His presence, He offers comfort that restores our weary hearts. Rest allows us to experience His peace in ways we cannot find elsewhere. God's guidance becomes clearer when we slow down and listen. His wisdom shapes our decisions, reminding us that He is always near. As trust grows, our hearts become lighter, and we learn to walk confidently in His promises. In surrender, we discover how deeply loved we truly are. God's peace becomes a steady companion when we commit to resting in Him daily. He strengthens us in moments of weakness and reminds us that we are never alone. Surrender allows His grace to work within us, freeing us from the weight of fear. When we place our worries before Him, He replaces anxiety with hope. Rest helps our hearts heal from stress and uncertainty. As we trust His timing, we begin to recognize how carefully He orchestrates every detail. His love surrounds us gently, teaching us to walk with confidence, patience, and unwavering faith in His goodness. In the end, surrender brings us to a place of deep peace where God's presence shapes every part of our lives. Resting in Him becomes a daily choice that strengthens our hearts and clarifies our purpose. He guides us through uncertainty with gentle wisdom, reminding us that His plans are always filled with love. When we release our worries into His hands, we make room for His peace to flourish. God meets us faithfully, transforming fear into courage and doubt into trust. In Him, we find refuge, healing, and lasting hope. His peace becomes our constant companion, forever steady and sure.